I'll probably want to go over this one. No. Let people use that. Let people roll that. Let people jump. Let people jump. Let people go down. Let people jump. Let people act official business. No. Undercover business. No. Them police restriction. No. Them shell corporation. No. Representation. No. False infiltration. No. Them for the nation. No. Them for profession. No. Let people go down. Rogue of the nations. Full of deception. Rogue of the nations. Let people go down. Let people go down. Let people go down.
Helps when you unmute yourself. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first evening of the JDC Entwine Global Variety Hour. I am Robin Gelfenbein, your host for the evening, otherwise known as your coach potato, your chairwoman of the board, here for your Gelf quarantine, your Gelf isolation, coming to you live from a distance. From a distance, that's how I meant to do that. We're gonna get started here in just a minute, but I wanted to find out where people are from. So put it in the chat, let me know where you are tuning in from. I am here in New York City. I have been quarantining here for a while, and I'm so excited for tonight. We're so thrilled to have all of you here. We got another New York City, Westchester's in the house, Canandaigua, wow, Dayton, Pittsburgh, your couch in New York, awesome. Mississippi, Albuquerque, Toronto. I love Canadians. Wilkes-Barre, oh, hi, Debbie. Richmond, we got Madison and Cleveland, Ben in South Florida, Cape Cod, Boston. Wow, awesome. There's so many people like scattered all over the country, which is super, super cool. So I wanted to just share a little bit about my Jewish background. My last name is Gelfenbein, as I mentioned, but I had like kind of an unusual Jewish upbringing. My father, Roger Gelfenbein, his father, Morris, was a Russian Jew, and he came to the States and he married a Roman Catholic Italian woman named Philomena, and they got married. And so my grandmother, Philomena Gelfenbein, which is such a mouthful, they raised two sons, my dad and my uncle. Now, I'm Jewish because my mom is Jewish. She's a Cohen. Any Cohens in the house, make yourselves known, put a C for Cohen in the chat. And so my parents married. And what's funny about this, though, is that my father's brother is a Roman Catholic priest. And his name is Father Gelfenbein. So growing up, he was like super cool. Like we would go to mass with him just for Easter primarily. And a lot of times Easter and Passover overlap. And he would make matzah meal stuffing for whatever he was preparing. So he was very accommodating. It was very, very cool. The other thing that was super weird about my upbringing is that my parents sent us, I have two younger sisters, they sent us to church camp. And a lot of people, I always joke, I'm like, well, it's cheap and close by. But it was really because my dad wanted to have somebody, he knew the camp director and like they went to high school together, but it was so confusing for my sisters and me. I'm the oldest of three girls. And so we get there and we're doing like morning thought and evening prayer and Vespers, we're singing all day long. I mean, it was super fun. But then my sisters would say like, Robin, what do we do? We don't believe in Jesus. I was like, and like 9-year-old me is like, just don't sing the parts about Jesus. So that seemed to make perfect sense. We had a wonderful time. It was a really great experience, but I totally identify as a Jewish person, but I also feel really grateful to have this other side of me that's quite fun and flavorful and certainly interesting. So tonight we are, or wherever you are in the country, maybe it's this afternoon, today we are here to celebrate and learn a little bit about JDC Entwine through stories. So I want to know who has been on a JDC trip or a JDC Entwine trip. Put it in the chat. And by the way, this is going to be a really interactive experience because we want you to be a real big part of the show. And one of the things that's really helpful for performers is for us to see some chatter in the chat, even if you're like doing thumbs up or smiley faces or emojis, like whatever, as their story or their music is unfolding. And by the way, this is not like a plea for me right now to get like smiley faces, but it's just really fun to have this be a really interactive experience. So Lisa has been to Cuba and Morocco, best experiences of her life. That's awesome. You're gonna hear a story about Morocco tonight. Stephanie has been to Argentina, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. You're gonna hear a story about Azerbaijan. And I've been to Argentina, by the way. They have the best ice cream in Argentina. I know that I make ice cream cakes, so this is why I know these things. Allie says she's been inside Ukraine. Debbie's giving me smiles and love. I love it. Dina went on the same trip as Lisa to Morocco, and Dana went to Ukraine and virtually went to Morocco. Very cool. Karen went to Ukraine, Bulgaria, and Greece. Awesome. Well, listen, when we are out of this pandemic, I am like hopping on a flight and doing one of these trips because they are so meaningful and so important. And they're really, it's such a valuable experience, and you're going to hear a lot about that tonight. Now, back in January, I started working with our storytellers on their stories about their JDC Entwine trips. And the original intent was to have these be live shows in comedy clubs and theaters in New York, DC, LA, and San Francisco. And so I was coaching the storytellers on their stories. And then we took an unintentional break because of this thing you might have heard of. We'll call it the C word. But now we're back, and you are in for such a treat because you're going to hear so many fascinating stories and like really moving stories too. And in addition to that, you're going to hear some music. We're going to have a blessing. And I wanted to just remind you that a lot of times when we share our stories, like in the storytelling world, there's actually a world, there's like a whole genre. I just want to remind you that they're true. So if you hear something that sounds sort of outlandish, it's all true. That's sort of like the beauty of storytelling. And tonight you're going to hear stories that are funny and touching, and sometimes a combination of the two. And the theme for this evening is community. And if you look at it, like tonight, we're having our own community by having this wonderful shared experience with JDC Entwine. So before I share our fun little interactive bit, I would like to know who has been to or heard a storytelling show before. Put a yes in the chat or put a no in the chat and just let me know. And yes, Beth has. Cool. No, yes, no. We got a lot of yeses. That's awesome. It looks like it's like 50-50 so far. And it's just a beautiful art form, and I really love it because I really feel like in times like these, we need opportunities to connect with other people, and there's no better way to connect with other humans than through storytelling. So, okay, so Martha says yes, Jeffrey says nope, all good. If you haven't been before, I hope you enjoy your maiden voyage. Okay, so like I said, you're gonna be part of the show. So as part of each performer's introduction, we are going to be playing two truths and a lie. So I'll be sharing what those are about each person, and then after their story or their song or whatever it is, I'm gonna ask you to all fill in, like tell us what you think the lie is. And then there's no prizes, but bragging rights are on the line. So I say, let's do it. So I'm gonna start out by giving you my 2 truths and a lie. Okay, pay attention. A, I like chocolate ice cream. B, I have been to Antarctica. Or C, I drove the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. All right, I'll repeat those. A, I like chocolate ice cream. B, I've been to Antarctica. Or C, I drove the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. Jeff is saying, I have not been to Antarctica. Beth is saying that I don't like chocolate ice cream. Interesting. Antarctica, there's a Wienermobile. People are suspicious of Antarctica mostly. Oh my gosh, everybody thinks I haven't been to Antarctica. Any more takers before we move on? Hi, Susie. I'm excited to have you here. All right, drum roll. I'm gonna do a little drum roll. I don't like chocolate. Guess what? Ben, you are right. I don't like chocolate. And I've been to Antarctica, and I drove the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. Here is a wiener whistle. Not that that's proof, because anybody can get a wiener whistle if they see the Wienermobile, but there we go. All right, so thanks. You guys, I love how engaged you are already. This is gonna be so fun. And by the way, all the 2 truths and a lie are a little sneaky, or a little tricky like that. So thanks for playing. And we're gonna get this show rocking and rolling. I would like to introduce this woman. She is a school rabbi and Jewish studies instructional leader at Milken Community Schools. She also traveled to Georgia and Azerbaijan in 2018 through the Weitzman JDC Fellowship. And her 2 truths and a lie, and you can just log these for now, we'll come back to it afterwards, is that A, she speaks 3 languages fluently. B, she used to live in an RV, which by the way, could be super helpful right now, much like my weenie bagel. And 3, she's been to 43 countries. So noodle on that for a little bit, and please give a very warm welcome to Rabbi Tarlin Rabizadeh.
Thank you, Robin. So I've been tasked with the honor of starting us off, and as Robin explained, each day has a theme, and today's theme is community. And I've been thinking a lot about how during this time of COVID, a lot of us have been spending a lot of time in quarantine alone, or maybe with our significant others or extended family in close quarters. And I've come to realize that we've been struggling with a lot of things, but a lot that we are facing has to do with acceptance. Acceptance of our reality, acceptance of this reality, acceptance of ourselves, how we're coping with it, and facing moments where we're having a difficult time with this crazy, unprecedented time that we're living in. But all of that to say that the meaning of community is also about acceptance. So yesterday I actually looked it up. The dictionary definition talks about how community has to do with a group of people who come together because of a shared similar interest, like politics, or in our case, religion. We are Jews, caring about Jews from around the world. And what I love most about JDC is that unlike most other Jewish organizations that want to help Jewish communities around the world by encouraging them to make aliyah and move to Israel to make it their homeland, or find other ways to sort of dictate their own agenda on these small minority Jewish communities around the world in exchange for their help, JDC meets these Jewish communities where they are at and where they want to be and remain. And I love that. On my JDC Entwine trip to Azerbaijan and Georgia, the country, we were welcomed with open arms. Children from local Jewish communities danced for us in their cultural costumes, sang us songs, even some in English that they had learned just because they knew we Americans were going to be visiting. They wanted to make us feel welcomed, to teach us about their culture and their ways and their delicious foods. And also they were extremely mindful of language barriers and cultural barriers, and went out of their way to prepare music and lectures in English just to be ready to share it with us and make us feel included. So what is community? It's definitely about having shared goals, but it's also about accepting the fact that not everyone speaks the language you speak, eats the food you eat, wants to live in the same way you live, or believes that the solution to the current problem they are facing is the solution or conclusion you would bring to it. Community is not just about coming together because we agree on a set list of values. A community is also about coming together and realizing that each of us understands and works towards those values differently. As Jews around the world, for example, we share the same religion. We study the same Torah, but we celebrate those same holidays, and we eat different foods and flavors to celebrate those same cultural moments. I was raised in a Persian Jewish community, and at the end of every prayer service, we greet each other with the phrase, Qabul Bashe, which comes from the Hebrew Qabul, Kabbalah, which means, may your prayers be accepted, or more specifically, may God accept all the prayers you just sent up to heaven today. Qabul Bashe. Because at the end of the day, I think all we really want is just to be accepted for who we are and what we think, to just be given a chance to explain where we are coming from. Because more likely than not, there isn't only one way of understanding a thought, a moral, or a way of life. So I leave you with this blessing. My blessing to you as we kickstart JDC with the theme of community is that as you listen to the many, many stories that will be shared, you come at it with an open heart. And that even though other people might live a life that is not familiar to you, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. But that the only way we can ever be a community is by listening, learning, and growing from another's perspective. Because acceptance doesn't mean adopting another way as your own. Acceptance means trying to understand where the other is coming from. And only when we allow our similarities and differences to coexist together can we be a true, worldwide, caring community. Thank you.
That was so beautiful, Tarlin. Thank you so much. It's such an important message for all of us right now. And it's one of the things that I love about storytelling is when you're talking about acceptance and not adopting, but the fact that you really are trying to be really empathetic to another person's experience. So thank you for starting us off with such a beautiful blessing. And as far as Tarlin's two truths and a lie, I saw that Jeffrey was boom on there. And feel free to unmute yourself, Tarlin. So out of the three, I'm going to repeat what they are. A, Tarlin speaks 3 languages fluently. B, she used to live in an RV. Or C, she's been to 43 countries. So let's see what they say. And by the way, if you look in the chat, people are saying really nice things about how beautiful and very lovely and sweet to listen to. Susie is saying that you have not been to 43 countries. So Debbie's saying that. Karen and somebody from JDC, they don't think you lived in an RV.
Let me know when it's a moment of truth, Robin. Let me know.
Is it the moment of truth or the moment of lie? Moment of lie. Tell us, Tarlin.
Well, I've lived in an RV. I have to tell you, I have lived in an RV for 11 months. Sorry to disappoint. I do speak 3 languages. And maybe if JDC can help me, I will one day be able to visit 43 countries. But I think I'm around 11 at this point in my life.
That's impressive, no matter what.
Impressive. Knock on wood, I'm lucky.
That's great. I have so many questions about living in an RV, but I don't want to hold this up. So if you have questions, put it in the chat. And thank you again, Tarlin. And let's put some applause in the chat for Tarlin. And we are going to move on to our next, and actually our very first storyteller. And I'm so thrilled to have him here. He is a graduate of Hebrew Union College. He is part of the Jewish Emergent Network's Rabbinic Fellowship, where he worked at Washington, D.C.'s 6th and I Synagogue, Mazel, applause for that. And his 2 truths and a lie are as follows, and we will share them after his story. A, he has a pet turtle named Mr. Slow. B, he has visited every Canadian province and territory. Or C, he dropped out of theater school to move to New York City. So while you think about that, please give a very warm welcome to Rabbi Jesse Paikin.
Thanks so much, Robin.
Thank you.
I'm standing in line at a customs and immigration checkpoint in Frankfurt, Germany. I love traveling. I love airports and flying. I've got a thing for Germany too, but border officials make me extremely nervous. I feel a gut-wrenching anxiety when I cross the border back and forth between the US and my home in Canada. Like the guards are searching for my eyes to see what I'm hiding, like I'm assumed to be bringing something nefarious with me. Where are you coming from? New York City. Why are you coming to Germany? I'm connecting flights to Baku, Azerbaijan. Why are you going there? On an educational trip. And what are you bringing with you into Germany? Nothing, just my baggage. Once I clear customs, I let out a sigh of relief and I go back to my previous state of excitement because I know that in 72 hours or so, I'm going to fulfill a dream I've had for a very long time. 10 years ago, I was stuck in the middle of one of those late night deep dives into the depths of Wikipedia, where you initially go to find some quick bit of information, maybe the cast of a show you're binge watching, but then 3 hours later you merge, learning all about the aquatic life at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean and the strange history of men's water polo and the list of all the famous celebrities from your hometown. And that's how I learned that one place in the world outside of Israel whose entire population is Jewish is in the remote mountains of Azerbaijan in a village called Girmizi Gasaba, and that this means Red Town, and that the people who live there are known as Mountain Jews, and that they've been living there for close to 3,000 uninterrupted years. I can't for the life of me remember what I was originally searching for, but boy was I tickled to learn about this. As a student of history and religion, I was fascinated by the idea of an entirely Jewish town, the world's last surviving shtetl. Did they speak Hebrew? Were their customs the same as mine? Are their ancient practices more authentic? They predate most of our Jewish communities by thousands of years. And why don't more people know about this? It was hard for me to find other people who were as excited as I was about this little piece of trivia, so I mostly just filed it away in the back of my head. And now, having cleared German customs en route to Azerbaijan, it's all that I'm thinking about. I'm going to get to travel to the city of Girmizi Gasaba in the mountains of Azerbaijan and meet the mountain Jews. I am beyond excited. We arrive in Baku late at night, past midnight. I'm entirely jet lagged and totally disoriented. This is the furthest east I've ever traveled in my life, and I'm feeling unmoored. Not everyone in our group traveled together, so it's only at breakfast the next day where I meet most of my companions, the people I'm going to be traveling with for the next week and a half through Azerbaijan and Georgia, the country. And we get to know each other over fairly decent hotel coffee and a breakfast buffet with cuisine clearly designed to appeal to travelers from the West and also the East and the North and the South. Traditional tomato stews alongside sugary breakfast cereals right next to pickled fish. Very disoriented, but excited. While everyone has traveled and lived abroad before, there's still this feeling of shared pride and a rush at what's to come. Most people don't get to do this. I've finally found the kind of history nerds who are equally excited at my Wikipedia discovery. I'm meeting my people. A few days later, after spending time in Baku, our bus pulls up a dusty mountain road. We're getting closer to the mountain Jews. Disembarking the bus is a practice in contrasts. This is the same kind of comfortable highway coach you might take to a hockey tournament or between New York and Boston. But as we enter the remote village, it's filled with houses with tin roofs and brightly painted wooden doors, low brick walls, winding gravel roads running up and down the hills, and nobody around. The village appears to be entirely devoid of people. We can hear the nearby river rushing behind us. Where are all the mountain Jews, I wonder? Most of them, it turns out, have left to Moscow or Israel or all points west, east, north, and south. Most have left, but not all. We are invited to meet with a group of high school students. And as we approach the one-room schoolhouse, I'm aware that it doesn't quite look like what most of us think of as a school. An old stone building with a dilapidated roof, just a few electric lights hanging from the ceiling, and no air conditioning, just 2 metal fans circulating the dry air. Azerbaijan is one of the most oil-wealthy countries in the world. I guess I thought that air conditioning would be more prevalent, but it's stifling in the Caucasus Mountains in the middle of July, and I'm aware of the jet lag nagging at me. So I choose a seat at the corner of the room, closest to the door and furthest back, so if I nod off, I'll be less noticeable. For a few hours, we sit around the edge of the classroom inside, but watching from the outside as this group of 15 or 20, all teenage girls, is taught by 2 teachers. One, a rabbi in a black hat, and one, a woman who we really won't get to know, both standing in front of an old chalkboard. The students are all dressed modestly, and I wonder if they're also feeling the gaze of the mountain sun. They're studying the traditional education that is expected of a Jewish teenage girl. Laws of preparing for holidays, laws of marriage and relationships, some Torah study and prayer. And they all have cell phones. These appear to be less distracting than what you might expect in a room full of high school students, but they're here. One-room schoolhouse, tin roof, modest clothes, traditional patriarchal curriculum, Android cell phones. Add that to the jet lag, and my mind is racing to figure out where I am and with whom I am. So we learned that the rabbi is a teacher from Chabad. Strange, I know from my Wikipedia deep dive 10 years ago that the Jewish community here is neither Ashkenazi nor Sephardi. It's descended from the original Persian Jews 3,000 years ago. So what's an Ashkenazi Chabad rabbi doing teaching this group of Azerbaijani Jewish girls? Well, with the departure of much of the Jewish community and the lack of institutional support, the worldwide Chabad movement has taken upon itself to pick up the slack and invest in this community. But we're not in Eastern Europe, and these aren't Hasidic Jews. The rabbi wasn't from this village of Girmizi Gasaba. He was born in Russia. We would see lots of beautifully empty synagogues that day, renovated with Russian money and filled with Russian translations of Sidurim left over from the Soviet era. But we're not in the USSR anymore. I wonder, where is the money coming from and what's the agenda behind it? Somehow it all feels colonial and a little bit disingenuous to me, like the sugar cereal at breakfast. Back in the one-room schoolhouse, the students are singing to us in Hebrew. There is so much pride emanating from them as they get to represent their community and share what they're learning. But once we get to conversing with them and start asking questions in translation, you can see the discomfort start to set in amongst my fellow travelers from the West. One of us asked, "Do you want to go to university?" Another, "Do you get to choose who you'll marry? Will you ever have a career? Why don't you want a life where you get to make your own decisions?" A pause between each of the questions as we wait for the interpreter, and then at each question, blank gazes from the Azerbaijani students. They didn't quite know how to answer these kinds of questions. Some of this was simply the challenges of working through a translator, conveying meaning and syntax and emotion all in one. But clearly our line of questioning was incredulous to these young girls. They didn't have answers other than, "That's not what we do. That's not who we are." I glance at the rest of my group and see most people shifting uncomfortably in their seats, squirming, exchanging knowing glances as if to say to each other, "Oh, you poor girls." This is not the brand of Judaism that most of us grew up with. Most of the group are liberal rabbinical students, mostly from the United States, and these questions betrayed their identity. I'm still groggy from the jet lag, but awake enough to feel moments of curious surprise at my peers. And while I heard these sentiments of, look at these poor Jewish girls, when I looked at them, they didn't seem poor or closed or shut in to me. Like a more sinister version of the sugar cereal at breakfast, the kinds of questions my fellow travelers asked, my fellow students of history and culture, struck me as imperialistic. I was disturbed by how we brought our own cultural assumptions into their home. Was I just some American cultural imperialist marching into this ancient village, wondering where the closest McDonald's and egalitarian shul were? I'm not even American. I was challenged by how hard it was to peel back the layers of this 3,000-year-old community through the dust and the crumbles of Soviet oppression and Chabad hegemony. But in all this digging, I couldn't help but ask myself, were we just doing the same thing? Our group was not a totalitarian regime. We were not directing the flow of large sums of money for ideological purposes, but we still brought in the imposition of our ideas of normative Judaism and normative culture. Some of it feels innocuous. I thought there would be more air conditioning. Rookie mistake. Some of it feels significant and still does, so much bigger. When we say we're part of a worldwide community called the Jewish people, what does that actually mean? Do we see ourselves as kin or as interlopers? Do we find ourselves stitched together or separated on some scale of how civilized we are? Walking back through the village, down the mountain, down the road to our air-conditioned highway coach, I felt like an imposter. I know that you can learn a lot from Wikipedia, but you can learn a lot more from gazing into a human face. It's one of the very challenges of this moment. How do we learn when we encounter people who are different from ourselves? On the bus ride back to the hotel, I thought, maybe the Azerbaijani people who stay at the hotel really do like sugar cereal at breakfast. Maybe it's not cultural imperialism, but just the benefits of globalization. Maybe the girls in Girmizi Gasaba thought nothing of our questions. Or maybe they secretly harbored wishes to leave and get a degree from an Israeli university. Maybe it turned out that my traveling history nerd peers weren't actually my people after all. Or maybe they were just asking honest questions. What I know is that the questions we ask are as much about ourselves as they are about others. I thought about this as the US Customs official interrogated me when I landed at JFK. Where are you coming from? What's your purpose here? What are you bringing with you? The anxiety bubbles up within me. But maybe it's an anxiety that we should always carry with us when we leave home and go somewhere else. We never fully detach ourselves from our homes and our communities. We wind up packing all of our assumptions and values and norms into our baggage, but nobody checks for that. Nobody charges us an overweight fee at the airport for our biases before we get on a 15-hour flight and go to somebody else's home. It should be the not so fine print that we carry with us always. Where am I coming from? What's my purpose here? What am I bringing with me? Thank you.
That was beautiful, Jesse. Show Jesse some love in the chat. Yes, Annie. I hear Annie in the background. Such a beautiful and really important story for us right now, especially the piece when you were talking about having the opportunity to not looking at Wikipedia, but having the chance to look at someone's face. I mean, we're running into that right now. I can see you because we are on Zoom together, but I can't see the audience, and it feels like I want to connect with everybody as much as possible. So we're hopefully connecting with everybody who's listening, and I'm sure a lot of people connected with your story, Jesse. Somebody did ask where people are tuning in from. So can you tell us where you are, Jesse?
I'm in Thornhill, Ontario right now, just north of Toronto, staying with my family here.
Excellent. And I'm going to look at some of the comments in the chat, but in the meantime, I wanted to say two things. One is that or ask you, who did you travel on that trip to Georgia and Azerbaijan with? Somebody everybody's going to know.
Yeah, well, Rabbi Tarlin, who led us in just an amazing, beautiful blessing, she was there with us, and Josh Mercutis, Rabbi Josh Mercutis, who is behind the scenes, I imagine, from the JDC, was also there with us. My wife, Rabbi Stephanie Crawley, who is watching right now, was with us, and a large group of rabbinical students and freshly minted rabbis.
Excellent, so many. Okay, so just to remind people of your 2 truths and a lie. And I saw Jeffrey is cracking me up, because even though I say wait until after somebody's story or their blessing, he's like on it. He's like, I'm not gonna wait. I'm gonna tell you what the answer is. What happens, Jeffrey, is that you get lost in the chat, and so you're gonna have to put your answer down again. Okay, so 2 truths and a lie. A, does Jesse have a pet turtle named Mr. Slow? B, has he visited every Canadian province and territory? Side note, I was the first person to take the Wienermobile to Canada. Or C, that's how I knew all the area codes the other day, Jesse. Or C, did he drop out of theater school to move to New York City? So let's see what people are saying. Somebody said that, I saw it earlier, something about your turtle. I don't see it, but let's see if there's some answers since then. They're all giving you such praise for your beautiful story. Okay, Susie says theater school. There's a few people who think that you don't have a pet turtle named Mr. Slow. And Ariel says she really hopes it's true that you have a turtle named Mr. Slow. So
should I make Ariel's day? I have a turtle. We have a turtle named Mr. Slow. He's actually quite fast, but no, that's his name.
That's funny.
I have not been to every province and territory. I was thinking the same as Rabbi Tarlin, that the JDC should start doing, like JDC in Canada. I've been to Azerbaijan, but not across the whole country here.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that Josh put in some ways for you to follow Jesse on Instagram. He's at Jesse Paikin on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And he's also going to be rebooting his Daily Talmud on Instagram, and you can follow that at Daily Talmud. And thank you again, Jesse, for kicking us off with such a beautiful story.
Thanks so much.
Give him some love. Thank you. All right, next up, we have our musician for the evening. She is the Director of Marketing for Entwine, and her 2 truths and a lie are as follows. A, she was born in Madagascar. B, she helps 200 children in Africa get educated and fed every year. Or C, am I doing 1, 2, C, A, B, 3, whatever. Pick your number or letter. She has royal lineage. So think about that. And in the meantime, give a very, very warm welcome to Tadala Wheeler. Woo!
Thank you so much, Robin. That's amazing. So I'm just gonna sing a song I wrote a few years ago. I won my school singer-songwriter competition with this. So hope you enjoy. And snap wherever you are. Hey, 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 something about the gray in your eyes, something about the way you turn mine, frown into a smile, the rush lasts for a while, a while, a while. I've never known a love like this. Every breath's like the morning mist. I'm not afraid to unfold and show you what I hold. 'Cause all I ever wanted, all I ever wanted has come true. I jumped over the edge, looked back and I saw you Our hearts are raging like wild wolves. Our words escaping, we become so full. We know exactly what this means, as real as it can be, 'cause all I ever wanted, all I ever wanted has come true. I jumped over the edge, look back and I saw you falling too, deeper than the ocean, higher than the sky could ever reach. The one thing that I'm hoping is that I never wake up from this dream, 'cause all I ever wanted has come true. I jumped over the edge, look back and I saw you falling too, deeper than the ocean, higher than the sky could ever reach. The one thing that I'm hoping is that I never wake up from this dream. Hey, 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 hey. Thank you.
Woohoo! Sorry if I blown out your ears. Woohoo! That was awesome. Oh my gosh. What pipes. What a beautiful, beautiful song. And you said you won a singer-songwriter competition in high school?
I did. That's a story for another day. It was a complete mistake, and but it ended up really great.
That's fantastic. So you've obviously had this talent in your system for a very long time. So I would love to know where you are tuning in from tonight.
I'm tuning in from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm at my brother's house.
Nice. I used to live in the ATL. If you are tuning in from any part of Georgia, the state, not to be confused with references to Georgia earlier, let us know in the chat. And okay, so for your two truths and a lie, Tadala, let's see what people think. A, was Tadala born in Madagascar? B, does she help 200 children in Africa get educated and fed every year? Or C, I seriously can't remember if I'm going 1, 2, C, or what. I need to eat something. Does she have royal lineage? Let us know in the chat what you think. And in the meantime, we'll do a little drum roll. Susie says she thinks you are of royal lineage. Where's your crown? Bradley thinks you were not born in Madagascar. Jeffrey says the same thing. A lot of people don't think you were born in Madagascar. Hey, Louisiana. Thanks for being with us. All right, so Tadala, what's the lie? Big reveal.
I'm actually not from Madagascar, so you guys who know Madagascarians, I'm not one of them, but I am from Malawi, so it was like an adjacent lie, you know?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's like me with my chocolate ice cream. I like ice cream. I just don't like chocolate ice cream.
Just like change the specifics and
Yeah. So you just never know. All right, well, put some love in the chat one more time for Tadala Wheeler. Thanks again, Tadala. That was really, really spectacular. Okay, I'm gonna bring out our second storyteller. I say bring out like she's in a closet or something. She's not here with me. I actually know where she is, but I'll let her share that with you after her story. She is a field manager for One Table in the greater DC area, also known as the DMV, which was news to me. I didn't know that was the acronym for the DC area, kind of like the ATL or Jesse, the T-Dot or TO as they used to say. And One Table actually invites people in their 20s and 30s to connect to each other, to ritual and to wellness and to Shabbat. And after you hear her story, you're going to understand why this job is so perfect for her. So her 2 truths and a lie are A, she's been bungee jumping, B, she's led Passover Seders on 3 continents, or C, she grew up with a cat named People Dog. So mull that over, and in the meantime, give a very, very warm welcome to our second storyteller, Annie Prusky. And remember to give her some love in the chat throughout her story. Thanks. Take it away, Annie.
My whole life, I've been like my family's super Jew. They sent me to Jewish day school for elementary school. I stayed through high school. I volunteered to write essays on Jewish values. I experimented with kashrut and Shabbat. But more important than any observance, I just really unironically love Judaism. So, super Jew. And this worked for me. I thrived. I felt like a link in a chain stretching back to Abraham and Sarah and ending with me. But as super Jew, I felt a lot of pressure to not mess it up, to keep the chain going. But I loved it, and I loved Judaism, and it totally worked to me. And then I got to college, and I started discovering things about myself that made me think that although I loved it, that the Judaism that I was raised in wasn't necessarily what I wanted for my future. But I didn't know what other options were out there. I didn't know what else Judaism could look like. So I started hanging out with Jewish people who had had really, really different experiences from me. And sometimes this was hard, but usually it was awesome. There were all these ways of being Jewish that I had never even heard of, never even thought of, and it made me curious, what else is out there? So I graduated college and I started a job at Hillel, working on campus. And I loved working for a pluralistic organization, helping students discover different ways of being Jewish and what being Jewish meant to them. But you can only provide what you understand. And I sort of understand American Judaism. I kind of know Israeli Judaism, but I was missing everywhere else. And everywhere else is really important because for the last 2,000 years, Jews have lived only everywhere else. So I had this opportunity through professional development, through my work, and through JDC Entwine to go to Morocco. And I jumped at the chance. I was so excited for Morocco. I was so excited to go to Africa for the first time. I was excited to try vegetable tagine. I was pumped to learn about the past and the present of the Jewish community in Morocco. I was really excited to speak to people and hear their stories. I think that deep down, I was also a little bit different. I was also a little bit nervous. I was worried that Morocco would be too different. See, I was raised to believe that all Jewish people are responsible for each other, that we're all part of one people, no matter what languages we speak or music we listen to or food we serve at our kids' bar mitzvahs, we're all a part of the same people. And this works moderately well in the United States, but I think I was worried that Morocco would feel too different, that it wouldn't feel connected, and that it would break the story that I had been raised with. And that was a little bit scary, and that's why I think I hadn't admitted it to myself. So before we landed in Morocco, I was picturing either essentially the movie Casablanca or the desert. I know that that's not accurate, but I didn't know what else to expect. And then when I arrived, I found Morocco to be so beautiful. There were bright colors everywhere and smells and the tiles and the gorgeous Islamic geometric art and architecture. It was amazing and fascinating and delicious. It was also extremely hot, but I was excited to be traveling. And fortunately, I found a lot of familiar things. Small things, like we went to visit this Jewish day school, and the kids, I think they were like third graders, were performed for us. And they were reciting a prayer that I knew, in a tune that I knew, and I felt like I was home. And then I turned and I saw this poster that had all of the sections of the Torah laid out on a clip art scroll. And it was the exact same poster that I had in my third grade classroom, which was just totally ridiculous and random and great. Or personality things. We had this amazing tour guide named Rafi who knew like everything, like encyclopedic knowledge of Morocco and Moroccan Judaism. And he would say things like, oh, Moroccan Jews believe this or do this or say this. And then we would meet other Moroccan Jews and they would say, oh no, it's not like that at all. And I thought, that feels familiar. Jews can't agree on anything. I'm in the right place. Or personal things. Like I remember we went to visit these sisters, 2 really old sisters who were living in JDC sponsored housing. And their apartment was up a bunch of flights and it was in like this tiny dining room that felt like almost like a dollhouse because it had so much furniture in it and all these pictures. And with all of us in it, with them and with their niece who was translating, like there was no room to move, but I was just so excited to be there. And they spoke no English, only French, maybe a little bit of Arabic. And like I said, their niece was translating. And so through her, I was just so struck by how much history they held, about how they felt deeply Moroccan and very tied to the country, and yet in some way different from their non-Jewish neighbors. And that felt familiar to me as an American Jew too. And so even though the surroundings looked very different, I found things to connect to. I found things that were the same. But a lot felt really different. And some of that was cool, like the history. I mean, I wanted to go to Morocco specifically because of the history, but still I was shocked by how deep it was. That Morocco, which is a Muslim majority country now, Jews have been living there for hundreds of years before Islam existed. That there have been Jewish grandparents in Marrakesh complaining that their grandkids don't visit them since before the Talmud was written. I remember we went to this one synagogue, and I remember staring at this plaque, and it said, "The New Synagogue, built in 1492. And I was like, what? Something new here is older than the colonization of my entire country? That the same year that Christopher Columbus set sail, Jews fleeing the Spanish Inquisition fled south and encountered this community that said, we've been here for over 1,000 years. You're welcome here, but you're newbies. And they built their own synagogue. Pretty incredible. But some of what I found that was different challenged me. For Shabbat, we went to this synagogue. And, you know, I'm in DC. If I was in DC, I might call the synagogue an Orthodox synagogue, but Moroccan Judaism, like most Judaism outside of the United States, isn't denominational in the same way. So it's not an Orthodox synagogue, it's a Moroccan synagogue, it's Sephardi maybe, it's a different thing. And it was not my thing. I've been in plenty of synagogues with separate seating for men and women, sure, but this was separate rooms. And the only way you could see between them was there's this little window with a curtain, which was closed for some of the service and open for others. And I thought, shouldn't we move it and keep it open? But not my place. And then I remember the men were sitting in like rows and the women in benches, and the women were sitting on like chairs and stools and some benches, and it didn't look like there were any open seats except for in a very corner, like literally the corner, like there was nowhere to put my legs. And fortunately people were nice and they moved and I was able to sit, but I just felt so uncomfortable, like physically, intellectually, religiously. I thought, this is Shabbos? Like, this is what's supposed to be my rejuvenation? I felt so alienated, like there was no space for me, for who I was, or for me to do Jewish the way that I know. And then in the moment I thought, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be my thing. It's their thing. And who am I at 24 years old to say to their 2,000-year-old tradition, it's not right for me? But now that it's been a little over a year, looking back on that moment, I think it's not 2,000 years old. It's not some relic that's been preserved pure in a museum for my observing. It's a living, breathing, changing culture. That Shabbat service is just as new and modern as my interpretive Yom Kippur journaling service. This is their choice. This is how they want to spend Friday night. And how lucky am I to be a part of my people, of this people, where my Judaism and their Judaism are in conversation with each other, where the comparatively infantile culture of American Judaism gets to be in conversation with this community, which has been deepening and questioning and growing in this place for over 2,000 years, where their new stuff is older than any American Jewish anything. It puts all of the drama and struggles of United States Jews in perspective, that everything we've been through, every time we think, oh, the Jewish people are dying, they've been through that too, last week and last year and 500 years ago and 1,000 years ago, and they are doing just fine. I used to feel like I was the end link in a chain stretching back to Abraham and Sarah. But now I realize I'm not the end, but the middle. And it's not one chain, but a network. We support each other. We're entwined. The future of Judaism does not rest solely on my shoulders. All of American Judaism, my home Judaism, is just one tiny piece of this incredible network. That felt powerful to me and reassuring. I have the sense now that whatever experimenting I'm doing, any choice I make, is a part of this network. Before, I used to worry that my choices might cause the chain to break. Now I'm not afraid, because it's not on me. Everything is connected. We support each other, even as we do things differently. Jews aren't supposed to agree. That's the one thing we can agree on. So I can love my home community and feel that it's right for me. And that synagogue can be right for those women in Morocco, and Israel or France can be right for their grandkids. And we can all be a part of the same story. We can all be super Jews in our own ways. Thank you.
Yeah, super Jew. Way to go, Annie. I absolutely loved it. But I have to say, you've got a huge fan club in the chat, because just as you were starting, there was all kinds of shout outs for you. So it was really beautiful. Your mom said that you're so inspiring, and I figured out who your mom is because she made herself known. I actually thought it was a different Beth Shapiro. I was like, oh, my bad. So, and I wanted to make sure I asked this because somebody put it in the chat. They wanted to know if One Table does any Shabbat services for people 50 and over in the DC area.
The short answer is no. The longer answer is feel free to email me, Annie@onetable.org.
Excellent. And that's ONE instead of the number one?
Oh, Annie, ANNIE @onetable.org.
No, for one, like it's ONE.
Oh, ONE.
I know how to spell Annie.
One word.
And then I'm not sure if it was Josh or Jillian. They said when you were talking about super Jews, they said they call them Jew heads. Have you heard that term before?
Never heard that.
I hadn't heard that either. And tell us in the chat if you've heard Jew head or if you identify as one. Okay, so for Annie's two truths and a lie, A, has she been bungee jumping? B, has she led Passover Seders on 3 continents? Or C, did she grow up with a cat named People Dog? So don't say anything just yet, Annie. Let's see. Allison thinks that you did not go bungee jumping. Susie thinks the same thing. Jessica, hi Jessica. She's one of our storytellers for tomorrow night. Your mom said, hint, you're a chicken.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Thanks, Mom.
Jeffrey is weighing in once again, which I love. So everybody seems to think it's A. What is the correct answer, Annie?
That is the correct answer. I have never been bungee jumping.
Neither.
Wouldn't do it. Way too scary.
Oh my gosh, never. I can't even imagine it. So yeah. Jeffrey, 3 straight. I'm gonna blow the wiener and whistle for you. Way to go. All right, so thanks so much, Annie. Let's give it up for Annie one more time, whether you're clapping at home or put it in the chat. Thanks so much, Annie. So before I bring out our next storyteller, I wanted to share with you a couple of things that I have coming up. Given that this is a global event tonight, I'm actually speaking at a global podcast summit in a couple weeks, and they are trying to set a Guinness World Record. So if you are a podcaster or if you're interested in podcasting, I invite you to join us for that. I'm speaking on August 14th, and it's all free. I mean, there's stuff you can pay for that's like bonus content, if you will. But there are going to be details. I have details on my website, which is robingelfenbein.com. And there you can also find, I tell funny true stories all the time. I do a lot of coaching of storytelling, as you have seen tonight. And one of the things that I've done most recently that I'm really proud of is on March 13th, I started hosting a show for kids because I really wanted to help friends of mine with children who were stuck at home and working parents not knowing what to do with their kids. And so I've been hosting this show called Recess with Auntie Robin, and we're on hiatus for now, but I'll be bringing that back in the fall, and you can find out information about that on my Facebook page. And Josh was nice enough to put all my handles in the chat, so if you want to follow me on social, I would love to follow you back and stay in touch that way. And my storytelling show, if you want to hear funny true stories, I have people like Tim Gunn on the podcast, people from Orange is the New Black on the podcast too, and that's called Yum's the Word Show. So, all right, so I'm gonna bring up our next storyteller. She served as a Fulbright Fellow in Santiago, Chile, where she focused on Peruvian migrant women in the domestic service. And this is super cool. She thinks, this is not the 2 truths part, this is truth. She thinks, dreams, and speaks in Russian, Spanish, and English. Now for her two truths and a lie. Okay, A, she speaks the language of the country where she was born. B, she hung out with the Cirque du Soleil in Latin America. Or C, she visited Ethiopia. Let it simmer while we bring out our next storyteller, Lana Allman.
Oh, there we go. Visiting the Jewish community in the Peruvian Amazon was like visiting Narnia, and the magic wardrobe that got me there was a giving circle. You may ask what this has to do with my travels with JDC Entwine, and I say everything. Everything that led me to the Peruvian Amazon was connected to Entwine. In 2016, I was the co-chair of the first Russian-speaking Jewish trip to China. Other than Birthright, I had never done any organized trips and tried to stay away from them as much as I could. I didn't like sticking out like a tourist and always preferred to go off the beaten path. When I lived in Latin America, I immersed myself in the local culture and spent as much time as I could getting lost exploring the cafes and places not found in the travel books. As a matter of fact, I spent time with local farmers, migrant workers, and small business owners. China wasn't a place that I felt that I could do that in, and this was probably the only reason that I accepted the idea of traveling with a group. I had so many questions about the trip. What would the people be like? Would we get along? What would it be like to travel with 20 different political and religious views? And on the other hand, oh my God, I was going to China. After spending 10 days with 20 Russian speakers, I said that this was my first and last trip with JDC Entwine. No, it's not what you think. The trip was so great that I couldn't imagine anything like it. Each day was filled with learning, sightseeing, and exploring the history of the Jewish community in China. From a Fulbright scholar in artificial intelligence to a PhD student in biochemistry and a professor of Jewish film, our group was as diverse as the stories that each one of us brought. And I'm still friends with a number of people from our trip, some of whom I visited in New York, California, and Wisconsin. So that was it. Thank you, Entwine. That was awesome. And now I'm done. Until nothing could top this trip until I was scrolling through Facebook and saw an Inside Israel trip that focused on minority groups, philanthropy, and migration, a topic that was near and dear to my heart. I decided to reach out to Entwine and ask for details. Staff followed up with a call and an invitation to co-chair the trip. Wait a minute, I thought I was just asking for more information. And here I was, being offered to co-chair the trip. The trip was unique in that it had a giving circle component to it. I didn't know what giving circles were, and as a matter of fact, as a Soviet Jew, philanthropy was not a household topic, and giving circles weren't a known concept. And yet I decided to jump on board and head to Israel. On a hot evening in Jerusalem in June, the first activity that we did on the trip was establish our values to have a framework of what mattered to us, why, and what causes we identify with most. We traveled around the country and met with organizations that we would later consider to be recipients of the Giving Circle funds. The entire time, I was skeptical and concerned about the organizations that wouldn't receive the funds, and upset about them having to showcase their work and display their needs. I was uncomfortable asking about their finances, budgets, and what they would do with a potential $5,000. That's the Soviet mentality, to question and not trust a process or an institution. Through this giving circle, we met organizations that were making a change in Israel's minority groups, from Kaima Farm, who works with youth at risk, to an organization that supported Haredi women in job placements and a migration center that fought for refugee rights. We learned about organizations that very few people knew about. On our last day, after a long discussion and a review of our values and a voting process, we chose to allocate our pooled funds to Kaima Farm. A decision that I was very pleased with and fully supportive of. After 10 days, I was exposed to a new methodology and a way of giving and community building that I was not aware of before. I began to research the topic in greater depth and learned that giving circles were a leading way of supporting and creating community and organizations around the globe were part of this collective giving movement. That was it, really. No more Entwine trips. What could top this? And a year later, when speaking to a friend doing genealogy research and looking for ways to return to the former Soviet Union, I told her about an inside Ukraine trip for Russian speakers. And somehow found myself joining that group too. While I resisted the idea of returning to the former Soviet Union with a group of people and imagined going back with my family after nearly 30 years after immigrating to the US, for some reason I agreed to this trip. I discovered a sense of community that never existed there when I was a kid, and a level of innovation and desire to help and support across generations that I had never seen before. When I left Moldova as an 8-year-old, I had never been to a synagogue or celebrated a Jewish holiday. And here, I saw Jewish life and community, perhaps even stronger than what I had experienced in the US. On that trip, speaking with one of our JDC staff members traveling with us, giving circles came up again. She told me about Amplify, a small nonprofit organization in New York that inspires giving circles with Jewish values. Upon my return from Ukraine, I contacted Amplifier to ask them about a position they were hiring for. While the CEO quickly informed me that the position was filled, we continued to chat, and she stopped me when I told her that I spoke Spanish and previously lived in Latin America. Wait a minute, do you know about Lazos? She asked me. Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, on the Inside Israel trip, one of our participants from Argentina shared with us that he was part of a network for young professional community builders and entrepreneurs in Latin America called Lazos. Well, she said, we need someone to travel to Cancun, Mexico to facilitate a pop-up giving circle at their annual summit. I had no idea what a pop-up giving circle was, but I said yes. After training with Amplifier and attending their annual gathering in California, I understood that a pop-up giving circle is an experiential learning method to expose participants to all of the elements of a giving circle in a short amount of time, usually in 90 minutes. I adapted materials to a Latin American audience and was ready to go to Mexico. Upon arriving to Cancun, I had the chance to work with young leaders from Chile, Mexico, Argentina, and Peru, and coach them on the pitches that they were going to make in the giving circle to secure funds for their own projects. Just a year ago, I was skeptical of the entire process, and here I was about to facilitate a collective act of giving. A couple from Peru, Damian and Dalia, secured the funds after nearly a unanimous decision. Their project was to help build a library and connect a small Jewish community in the Peruvian Amazon to the larger one in Lima. The entire time working with the team, I couldn't help but wonder what this remote community in the Amazon was like. Damian and Dalia were planning a trip to Iquitos right after Hanukkah, and I decided to go with them. How could I pass this up? As we landed in Iquitos and walked off the small plane, the air smelled like burnt wood. It felt sticky and thick. Jorge and Paquita Abramovich greeted us and welcomed us to the community. The mattress store that Jorge owned and operated for decades in what once was a Peruvian music school was the entrance to the community. Behind the storefront and up a set of stairs, passing a chicken coop and a sitting area with a Star of David, we reached a room with an Israeli flag and a place where the community gathers for weekly services. The Peruvian community in Iquitos has been around since the late 1800s, when the Spanish immigrants arrived to Peru for the rubber trade. The Jewish cemetery, nestled behind the Catholic one and protected by a locked gate, keeps the memories of Jewish families with the last names like Ben-Sus and Toledano. The Jews of Iquitos have gone through several conversions, and many of them have left to Israel. But the several hundred people that have remained in Iquitos are a close-knit community that gathers for holidays, Shabbat, and other celebrations. I seem to have fallen into a world that I didn't know existed, and this was all thanks to a giving circle. When we give in an intentional way, we are better for it, and here I was connecting with a community that I could have only imagined reading about in books. Each of my Jewish JDC Entwine trips was a step into another world, another concept, and a different community. I learned about community building through innovation and philanthropy. Each of these trips was a building block that led to something bigger. In many ways, Entwine was the magic wardrobe that transported me to places and communities beyond reach. And every time that I thought that this was my last trip, I found just one more way to get involved, one more way to stay connected, and one more way to discover a new community. And this is exactly how a giving circle transported me to the Peruvian Amazon. Thank you.
All right, that was great. You're so inspiring. And you mentioned China at the beginning of your story, and I encourage you, just because I think you'll get a kick out of it. There's a story tomorrow night about China as well that is vastly different from yours, but yours was absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that, Lana. So let's see what Lana's 2 truths and a lie are. You've led a very full life. Okay, so does Lana A, speak the language of the country where she was born? B, has she hung out with Cirque du Soleil in Latin America? Or C, has she visited Ethiopia? Let's see. Jeffrey is saying that you don't speak your birth country's language. A lot of pressure on you, Jeffrey, because you were 3 for 3 so far. By the way, Annie's mom really loved your story. Okay, let's see. Bradley says Ethiopia. Annie thinks A is a lie. A lot of people think B is a lie. It's kind of mixed. Jessica thinks it's A, but her boyfriend thinks C. So going back to Annie's story for a moment, Jews don't agree on a lot. So, all right. So tell us what is the lie, Lana?
I do not speak the language of the country where I was born. I don't speak Moldovan, and I was born in Transnistria, which is a breakaway region that is primarily ethnically Russian. So, and being in the Soviet Union, it was also Russian. I did hang out with the Cirque du Soleil in Chile, and I did visit Ethiopia.
I am dying to know more about Cirque, because I'm just like, did they give you tips on being limber and flexible? Because I've been trying to work on my splits lately, and I'm just looking for pro tips. But beyond that, I'm really Cirque du Soleil is incredible. So I can only imagine that the stories you have from that trip as well. All right. Well, thank you again, Lana. Beautiful job. Give it up for Lana one more time. And okay, I just want to look at these comments here. Yeah, Jeffrey, you are on fire. I invite you to come back tomorrow night and Tuesday night, because we're going to have all different storytellers. I will be doing different truths and a lie for myself. And it's just going to be so many meaningful and really important stories to help us all connect over the course of the evening or afternoon or wherever the heck you are watching from. So, okay. All right. So, and then you just go to the same link to register for tomorrow night's events. They're also at 6 p.m. Eastern. Okay. So I am thrilled to bring up our final storyteller for the evening. You may have seen him on Conan, not once, but twice. You may have also seen him on the Late Late Show with James Corden. I would love to know if he ever got a chance to do carpool karaoke. That would be super cool. And he is a writer for the Emmy and Golden Globe winning series, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which was just nominated for 20 Emmys. And his 2 truths and a lie are as follows. A, he's afraid of penguins. I am not. I went to Antarctica, as we heard. B, he was born on Christmas. Or C, before starting in comedy, he went to culinary school. So give it a thought. And in the meantime, please give it up for Noah Garden-Swartz.
Thank you for having me. Just want to say it's an honor to share this evening with so many incredible stories. It's really special for me to be speaking about community, because the Jewish community has always been so near and dear to my heart. And even more so to get to speak on behalf of JDC, because kind of as Annie alluded to earlier, I'm an American Jew, and I think so many of us have always kind of viewed Judaism through a very narrow scope of America and Israel. And it really was the JDC that's responsible for opening my eyes to the global Jewish community. And thanks to the JDC, I've had the honor of traveling to visit Jewish communities in Russia, Latvia, India, Turkey, Spain, Cuba, and learned about Jewish communities in places like Ethiopia and Morocco and China. And unfortunately, as anti-Semitism seems to be on the rise, I feel like Jews constantly get grouped into one big idea of usually misinformed stereotypes. And it's important for the rest of the world to know, but even more important for us Jews to know that Jews are not a monolith. We're not all the same. We come from a variety of colors and classes, political affiliations, sexual orientations, and the best way to get to learn about that is to actually get out in the world and interact with various global Jewish communities. So I'm just forever grateful to the JDC for the life experiences that they've given me, and I feel very honored to be a member of the global Jewish community. But even though the Jewish community has always been very important to me, it became even more important over the last few months because 2 months ago, my wife and I welcomed our first child, Moses, into the world. We were living in Los Angeles for most of last year, and we had to move back to New York in February and had the wonderful timing of getting to enjoy the final trimester of our pregnancy and the eventual birth of our son while living in the epicenter of a global pandemic. So that was really interesting, but it truly was the Jewish community that got us through it in a variety of ways, some expected, some unexpected. Among the most unexpected, my wife found a really unique cure for her anxiety in the form of a Facebook group called Jewish Women Talk About Everything. I think she was initially drawn to the group, partly because it's probably the only place where a name like Esther Steinberg Gardenswartz doesn't even raise an eyebrow. Like in a group called Jewish Women Talk About Everything, if your first name isn't biblical and your last name isn't a multisyllabic hyphenate, that you're actually the outlier. But beyond that, she was a huge fan of and took great comfort in the like to comment ratio on every post, because apparently I didn't infiltrate the group. She would just occasionally share that, like, whether the post was about how to effectively run a meaningful Zoom Seder, what vacuum to use, or a good movie suggestion, it was about 10 likes and 475 comments. So at a time where it was really difficult and a lot of people literally felt unsafe to be in the same room as another human being for months on end, these women found a place to kind of be a sounding board, a shoulder to lean on, and just kind of share their thoughts and views. And honestly, a lot of them had nothing in common other than the fact that they were Jewish and they formed this community online. So I thought that was nice. And then the Jewish community really helped me in some expected ways. As I said, we moved to New York 5.5 months into our pregnancy, and I relied on the Jewish community to recommend a great doctor, where we found a wonderful Jewish OBGYN. Shout out to Dr. Joshua Holden, who practices at the not Jewish New York Presbyterian Hospital, but that's nor here nor there. But then also, I had to talk to my Jewish friends in New York City to get recommendations for a good moil. And of course, we're doing brisses in the Zoom era. So I, within minutes, was emailing multiple different moils, asking if they were comfortable coming over to my house to wear a mask and cut my son's penis. Truly strange times, but we got it done successfully. And so I'm just so thankful to the global Jewish community that I spoke about and the local Jewish community that I'm very proud to be a part of in New York City. But the story I actually want to just quickly share and leave everyone with has nothing to do with my son at all. My wife and I got married in September of last year, and we took our honeymoon to Italy at the end of September. And in being so excited to book tickets to Italy and to finally take our honeymoon, we were too busy checking the weather on the Amalfi Coast to actually check the Jewish calendar. And it wasn't until a week before we left for our honeymoon that we realized we were going to be in Italy over Rosh Hashanah. So we were suddenly going to be in Italy over the high holidays with no plans, no friends, no family, and no synagogue. So we started doing our research. And even though Rome has Italy's largest Jewish community, we thought it would be the coolest experience to spend Rosh Hashanah in Venice, which is home to the world's first Jewish ghetto. So we made our trip arrangements so that our time in Venice coincided with Rosh Hashanah. And when the day came, we went to the old Jewish ghetto for services. And when we were there, we found the Chabad having services, and they welcomed us in with open arms. And of course, we were very happy to be able to observe and celebrate Rosh Hashanah, but it was not much more than a service. After Rosh Hashanah services, my wife and I decided to kind of walk around the ghetto to just kind of soak in the history and appreciate the fact that hundreds of years later, in the world's first Jewish ghetto, we're still here. Not only are we still here, but we are observing Rosh Hashanah in the ghetto. So there was something that felt very special about it. And we were walking around, and our travels and our stroll kind of took us to the new Jewish area where everything was closed because it was Rosh Hashanah. But there was one restaurant that was a kosher restaurant, and it had Hebrew letters on the door, and it wasn't open, but there was a light on inside. And my wife and I decided, because it was Rosh Hashanah, we just went to knock on the door, and we honestly just wanted to ask if there's any chance that in the kitchen they had one apple and a little bit of honey, so we could just have apples and honey on Rosh Hashanah. So we went to knock on the window, and a guy came out, and we said, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I was just wondering, is there any chance in the kitchen you have an apple and a little bit of honey? We would be so grateful." And he said, "Are you Jewish?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, of course. What non-Jew is asking for apples and honey on Rosh Hashanah in the Jewish area? But I didn't want to be bothered, so I said, "Yes, we are Jewish." And he said, "Come inside." And he opened the door. Nothing was set up. There are still chairs on tables. Again, only one light on in the restaurant. And I started to feel bad. I didn't want to encroach on whatever this guy's plans were. And I just kind of reiterated, said, again, do not want to be a bother. Was just wondering, literally, if you have an apple and a little bit of honey, we'll be on our way. I'm happy to pay for it. And in very broken English, he basically said, just sit down and wait. So we didn't really know what was going on. And about 10 minutes later, another Jewish couple walked in from Israel, same story. They were just wondering if the restaurant was open. He asked if they were Jewish. They said yes. They sat down. 10 minutes later, a family from South America came. And over the next 20 to 30 minutes, all of a sudden, all these wandering Jews who were just looking for a place to observe Rosh Hashanah were suddenly in this restaurant. And before we knew it, they're bringing out challah, and they're bringing out wine, and they're bringing out apples and honey and salad and chicken and fish, all free of charge, just giving us the most beautiful, elaborate Rosh Hashanah lunch. And we all didn't have much in common. We were Jews from all around the world, kind of lost in this random neighborhood in a random country, but we all said the same Kiddush, and we all said the same Hamotzi, and we all made the same blessing over apples and honey, and we all said the Birkat Hamazon afterwards. And after 2 hours, all of a sudden, in line with the global Jewish community, we had new friends in Israel, in South America, Italian Jews who were traveling from other cities, and that entire experience just kind of encapsulated what it means to be a member of the Jewish community to me. And that is, no matter where in the world you are, no matter what you need, if you can find other Jews, literally or metaphorically, if you're just looking for an apple, you can leave with a full meal. And so that was just kind of my experience, and it was something beautiful that I will always remember and always be grateful for. So thank you.
I love that story. That was so touching. Really, I mean, the entire thing, but and the idea of wandering Jews, it was very funny. I feel like after you shared all the places where you have visited with JDC Entwine, that you should be an ambassador for them. Oh, is that Moses?
This ambassador,
Oh.
Moses, and he's actually wearing a onesie that says "Future World Changer," which was given to us by our friends at JDC Entwine.
I love it. For a second, I thought it was an apple that was on his shirt. Oh, Moses, what a sweetheart. And by the way, I know on behalf of, I think, everyone who's watching, I would like to thank you for the hot tip on the Facebook group, Jewish Women Talk About Everything, because
I'm not in it and I'm not spying, but it's my wife's most visited activity.
I'm a little nervous to go in. It seems like it could be like you could get sucked into this amazing vortex of conversation.
It's an opinionated bunch.
Big surprise. Yeah, I was gonna say, shocker. Okay, so for your two truths and a lie. Oh, before I forget, actually no, I'm gonna do two truths and a lie first. Okay, so for Noah's two truths and a lie, A, is Noah afraid of penguins? B, is he born on Christmas? And by the way, my birthday, Noah, is the day after Christmas. So whether that's true or not, we'll talk about that in a second. Or C, before starting comedy, did Noah go to culinary school? Jeffrey does not think you went to culinary school, so hold on your response. People think that you're not afraid of penguins. A lot of people think you're not afraid of penguins. A lot of people are saying that A is a lie. So what is it, Noah?
Well,
What's
first,
your lie?
I saw one question ask if I wrote the Jewish jokes for Tisha B'Av, and yes, I did. So there's one truth. But the lie is I did not go to culinary school. I am, in fact, very afraid of penguins. And I am born on Christmas, so I'm a fellow Capricorn with you.
I love it. That is fantastic. And I have to say that I'm going to send this to you and share it with other people who might want to see. It's a hard time of year to be born. I'm sure you can relate to that. So I wrote a song called Jesus Steals My Thunder. So I'll be sure to send that your way. And I'm wondering, like, have you been around penguins?
I've been at a zoo where there were penguins, and I left the exhibit. But no, I've never been up close and personal. And I'm not interested in exposure therapy. I'm not interested in ending that fear.
Okay, I'm going to send you a picture of me surrounded by penguins, lying on the ground in Antarctica doing a snow angel. Okay, so, and we have to give it up for Jeffrey because he got everything right. So way to go, Jeffrey. I feel like this is like Jeopardy. So tomorrow night you have to come back, Jeffrey, and we have to see if you can like keep it going. Okay, and then the other thing that I wanted to share about Noah is that you have two, obviously, you know, he's got two stand-up comedy specials that, comedy albums, excuse me, that you can find on Amazon, iTunes, or any of the music streaming services. And they are called Blunt and White Men Can't Joke. So.
Just White Man Can't Jump, which is my favorite movie. It's not like a political statement. So.
I got the reference. Yeah, and we put links to that in the chat. So thanks again, Noah, and Mazel on Moses, and shalom to Esther. And thanks for your beautiful story. And for actually, Noah's not the only person out of all of the storytellers over the 3 nights who has had a baby since the pandemic started, or pandemic adjacent, if you will. So come back either tomorrow or Tuesday to find out who that is. And in the meantime, I just want to thank all of the people who helped put this special evening together and the subsequent evenings that are going to be happening over the next 2 nights. Please put all your applause in the chat for Josh and Jillian and Naomi and Andrew and everybody at JDC Entwine. Thanks to all of our phenomenal performers and musicians and storytellers, Rabbi Tarlin Rabizadeh, Rabbi Jesse Pakin, Annie Presky, and her mother, Beth Shapiro, Lana Ullman, Tadala Wheeler, and Lana Ullman, and of course, Noah Garden Schwartz. And thanks to all of you for being here. I hope you had a really nice evening. I hope you feel like we created our own little community tonight and that you feel a little bit less alone in this world. And I hope to see you tomorrow and or Tuesday night right back here. You can follow the same link that you got on the JDC Entwine website. And thank you so much for being here and have a great night.